Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC, or Certified Life Coach Collective, an ICF-Accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. All right, today we're going to get into an interesting topic, which is tied to someone who is considered by many to be core to the field of psychotherapy, which is Carl Rogers. And therapy and coaching are, of course, different, and they have some overlap. And we can borrow ideas from therapy and human development that are applicable to coaching. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about Carl Rogers, and in particular, how his work ties into the very important coaching concept of building client trust. So let's get into it. Carl Rogers, some of you might remember him from any Psych 101 classes that you've taken, was the founder of what he called person-centered therapy. He believed that the central aim of therapy was to bring people back to wholeness. This idea that we are fundamentally whole, and then somewhere along the way we barter away, compromise, or lose pieces of ourselves. And then that causes us to behave or feel dysfunctional in our lives, and that the aim is to come back to wholeness. He was part of the humanistic movement in psychotherapy, which really marked a huge shift in the psychotherapeutic world away from Freudian ideas. You've probably heard of Freud before, Freud. Now, Freudian models were the dominant models in therapeutic practice for a very long time. And those models, that Freudian model, emphasized a very different idea. The Freudian model went with this idea that we are born with these dark, repressed desires, these impulses to hurt people who get in our way, to try to take power at all costs, and that we repress those impulses as part of being functioning members of society. And you could take an interpretation away from that the Freudian model might say that at our core, we are born into the world selfish and a little bit dangerous unless we repress these impulses. Now, Carl Rogers completely deviated from that. As part of this humanistic movement, Carl Rogers promoted the belief that we are all born inherently good, and that it's life's circumstances that fracture us and take us away from this sense of inherent wholeness. And Rogers believed that the goal of therapy was to return to that wholeness. So why am I bringing up all of this psychotherapy when this is the craft of coaching? Well, I bring Rogers into our coaching conversation because his ideas deeply influence modern coaching. You probably already figured that out just from listening. When we look at a client's tendency, for instance, to self-sabotage, it's not a sign that they're broken. When people self-sabotage, it's often a result of a wound or a learned fear or a habit that has thrown them off course. Now, Carl Rogers was a writer, and he wrote a book called A Way of Being. And there's this quote from his book, A Way of Being, that I really love. I'm going to read it to you here. He wrote, "Increasingly, I discover that being alive involves taking a chance, acting on less than certainty, and engaging with life. All of this brings change. And for me, the process of change is life. I realized that if I were stable and steady and static, I would be living death. So I accept confusion and uncertainty and fear and emotional highs and lows because they are the price I willingly pay for a flowing, perplexing, exciting life. Now, I'm not an academic on Carl Rogers, but I don't think we need to be academics to connect with his work, because isn't that what you want for yourself? Isn't that what you would want for your clients? Not 3-step plans to happiness, but the skill of being with what is and being willing to be in the confusion and the uncertainty and the fear, because you understand that that's part of a flowing, perplexing, exciting life. I often tell trainees in our CLCC Certified Life Coach Credential program, your job is not to fix your clients. They don't need fixing. They need presence, and they need someone skilled at holding space while they explore with curiosity what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. We often, as humans, need a lot more practice learning how to be with our experiences and to develop the capacity to navigate uncertainty and fear, because that capacity is the path to a meaningful, flowing life. So when you are working with a client, it's not about trying to fix them, and it's not about trying to give them answers. Really, the skill is about how can you be with someone else who is in a space of stuck, discomfort, fear, hesitation, doubt, and hold space with them, that being in that space does not define you, and more is possible. When we cultivate trust with a client, we enter the relationship the way we would any human relationship, believing the person is good and whole. When I first meet people, I don't believe that they're bad. I meet people, I think, oh, how nice person, right? Unless proven otherwise, right? When people make mistakes or sabotage themselves, it's not because they're fundamentally bad. It's because something got off track. It's because they learned a fear routine. It's because they learned a dysfunctional habit. And the same attitude is essential in how we relate to ourselves as coaches and yourself in your relationship with yourself. Walk into your relationship with yourself trusting that you are good and whole, and that when you make mistakes, it's because you've just lost your way temporarily. You're not actually fundamentally driven by some dangerous impulse that you need to repress. You're human. You're good. You're enough. And so are your clients. We are all imperfect. We all learn coping mechanisms that don't really serve us. And the coaching relationship becomes that space where clients can reconnect with their wholeness and goodness. And you as coach are holding that space of, I see you as whole and I see you as good, and I know you've got potential even though you feel so stuck. And to facilitate that, coaches need to be cultivating that same connection within themselves. That's why in our CLCC program, we include personal development work. You need to develop trust in your basic wholeness. Not perfectly, not all the time, every single moment. You're human. I'm human. I don't trust myself all the time. But there's an intentionality to deciding I am going to walk the walk and practice the practice of trusting in my basic wholeness and goodness. It's an ongoing journey. And your ability to hold that space for yourself is what will enable you to hold it for others. Now, coaching is influenced, of course, by more than just the humanistic model. We draw in coaching from cognitive behavioral traditions or narrative work, somatic practices, and even in CLCC, what we call process work, which comes from Arnold and Amy Mindell. In our program, we're offering a unique integration of those perspectives where you as a coach are learning which perspective resonates for you the most and feels most applicable, and you develop your own coaching style from that. But no matter the technique, trust is foundational. The craft of coaching hinges on it. If your client doesn't trust you, or if you don't trust yourself to coach them, you can't co-create a meaningful relationship. And of course, you cannot force trust. There's no 1, 2, 3 list of things to do to guarantee that someone will trust you or that you're going to feel trusting of yourself. Trust is built as a practice organically. Now, you can do some things to better facilitate trust in a relationship, to cultivate it. You can't guarantee it, but you can cultivate it. So how do we cultivate trust with someone we've just met, like a client, right? Well, one of the ways that I think that we do that is that we understand this fundamental piece about your clients are not broken. They are not coming to you in coaching for you to fix them. Most people have said at some point, I know I want to change. I'll make a to-do list and I'll execute on the to-do list. But that approach rarely works in isolation. You don't necessarily trust yourself more just because you say, I'll make a to-do list to change and I'll execute it. So again, if you are setting up your coaching practice as I have the solutions to your problems, just follow my 5-step plan and you'll be fixed, you're going to get some clients who are going to come through and they're going to go, I followed the 5-step plan. I technically did everything I was supposed to do. I still don't feel like I'm enough. I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing about my life or how to change. Hiring a coach is not about fixing, air quotes here, broken clients. It's about a commitment to self-development, to change. It's about wanting that change to be supported, witnessed. It's about perspective. There's a comparison you could even make here that there's a partnership between coach and client that could be almost like a writer partnering with a good editor. The writer is laying down the tracks of the story, and the editor has the perspective to say, hey, let's trim a little here. Let's focus over here. I want to give you some feedback over here. Now, there is a paradox at work here. Clients hire coaches to help them with challenges, but the coach can't do the client's work for them. Okay? There is a craft to this, and the coach is not the one pushing the action forward. So how can the coach maintain that space of I'm helping to push the client forward, nudge to facilitate some kind of transformation, but I'm not actually doing the work? As coaches, we're not just sitting back saying, talk to me. Go ahead, talk to me. There's a way that we listen, a way that we mirror, a way that you ask questions when you are a coach. It is a skill set, and it is one that puts the client in the driver's seat. So these are the coaching competencies that you learn: active listening, mirroring, which is a way of reflecting back to the client what they're saying, not exactly in their words, but in a way that helps to distill the essence of the message. And there's a way of asking questions that are clear, direct, forward-leaning. They're not leading questions. And this is something that is different than just a friend sitting with you in a coffee shop who provides that space and that supportive, I want to listen to what's going on with you. First of all, with a friend in a coffee shop, at least certainly with my friends, there's a reciprocity there. I listen and support sometimes, they listen and support sometimes. And of course, with coaching, as the coach, I only listen and support. I'm not asking my clients to devote part of their session time like, hey, can I get a little airtime here? And then also when friends are speaking, often friends do have agendas. Often friends do give advice or think, hey, I want to tell you what I think. And that's fine. That's a friendship. There's nothing wrong with that. But coaching is a different skill set. There's a way of asking questions and listening that is different and that is client-centered. Now, there's no single answer in terms of the technique or approach you want to use. Like I said, there are somatic techniques, there are narrative approaches, there are cognitive frameworks. But to come back to all of this Carl Rogers that I was talking about at the beginning, they all tie to you as a coach and your way of being. What is your default way of being with people? How do you show up in your initial interactions? Are you performative? Are you people-pleasing? Are you trying to show up perfectly? Are you kind of on the defense with some armor? What happens when you don't like someone? Do you avoid? Do you confront? Do you shut down? How do you approach conflict? And you could explore for yourself too, do I trust people easily? Am I guarded or open-hearted? Am I immediately very deeply loyal, or do I keep a healthy distance? These are all relevant questions because they affect how you show up as a coach. What is your way of being is a question that is worth exploring, and it's one we explore in our program because your way of being and how you show up and being aware, having self-awareness of that, impacts client trust. One of the concepts that Rogers emphasized was one called holding space for therapy clients with what he called unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard. To essentially sit down with a human and from the get-go, from the beginning, decide consciously to occupy a space with your client of unconditional positive regard and respect for who they are. So there's this place that we want to walk into that we can borrow from Carl Rogers that's about how am I showing up in the world and how do I consciously choose to show up for my clients? And then, of course, in the process of exploring your own personal growth, how do you bring unconditional positive regard to yourself? In some ways, that's the real question. Can you decide to change a behavior about yourself while still seeing yourself as good and whole? That's the work. Because it's the same regard you'll need to offer to your clients. Can you hold space for your clients and see that they want to change while not necessarily using, let's beat ourselves up as the motivation to change. Let's tell ourselves that we suck as the motivation to change. It's often easier with clients to say, hey, don't beat up on yourself. Have some compassion than it is for ourselves. So you cannot force trust, but what you can do to facilitate trust is to show up with that unconditional positive regard. We cannot force trust, but we can create the conditions where trust can grow. Empathy is also a key to how we create those and cultivate those conditions for trust to grow. Empathy is everything. In our coaching program, we do not believe in labeling clients as uncoachable. That word implies that a client is a lost cause, and in fact, it directly contradicts the idea of unconditional positive regard. Clients are not uncoachable. They're afraid. They are scared. They are entrenched in an old pattern, but they're not uncoachable. We're not like throwing them off. I'm going to fire you. I'm getting rid of you. You're uncoachable. That's like saying that someone is unredeemable. We can still say to clients, by the way, where there isn't a good fit in the coaching relationship, like if you have a client who's constantly late or disengaged or missing payments, if you need to end a coaching relationship, that happens. We do talk about that as well in our program. But I will say you can still end those engagements while honoring someone's dignity and humanity. So when you're in that first session with a client, the first several, the big emphasis is how do I build and establish trust? Empathy is that bridge. If a client says, I'm frustrated by this problem, I keep doing this thing over and over, I'm stuck, I don't know how to get out of this, tough love coaching is not the move. Instead, start with, what are you noticing coming up in your body? What's it like to be you in this moment? It sounds like it's been frustrating to want to change and not see it happen. Tell me more about that. Really, this space of active listening, asking open questions, things of that nature, this empathy, it's about slowing down. It's about witnessing someone, sitting with their fear, their sadness, their disappointment. It's not about rushing to affirm or fix. And you can really apply this pretty easily if you think about the last time you were upset and someone immediately offered you advice. Chances are you didn't feel heard. You felt dismissed, and trust goes down when you don't feel heard. So in our program, and what I encourage all coaches to do is to lead with that empathy. Slow down a bit. Say things like, here's what I hear you saying. Is that accurate? Tell me more. What do you notice about that? What's your experience of that? This line of questioning is actually what builds trust. And it's not a technique or a strategy. It's a way of being. So we emphasize helping clients identify and explore their way of being, even if that includes fear. Again, we're not going with the bro podcast thing of forget about fear, tell your fear to shut up. That's pathologizing fear. Instead, in our program, we're about slowing down and understanding fear. And often when clients stop making fear wrong, they shift. And when they're in the presence of a coach like you that isn't going to make fear wrong, there's more space to shift. I'm going to give you another paradox about trust, which is that when we stop forcing trust, like if you stop trying to force trust by some kind of performative behavior with another person, when you stop trying to force it, trust grows. When we stop forcing change, change actually emerges. When we stop resisting feelings, that's when we transform. And that's the kind of space that coaches can hold, and it's incredibly powerful. Now, we draw from psychotherapy because our industry is still growing, and psychotherapy coaching is really an offshoot of psychotherapy. And I recommend many psychotherapeutic resources. Rogers is an incredible resource. His book, A Way of Being, which is what I quoted earlier in this episode, is a collection of essays that I highly recommend. I also would recommend checking out Irving Yalom's The Gift of Therapy. Yalom is Yalom. And that's another resource on therapeutic presence and being. And last, if you want to develop your ability to build client trust with these skills of active listening and empathy that I've been talking about, practice. Get training and practice. Practice with other coaches. Practice, of course, with your clients, and practice with yourself. Practice with yourself. Your way of being is the foundation for trust, and trust is where everything good begins. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, would you help us out and take a moment to give us a rating in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening? It really helps us get the word out to other listeners. And before you go today, would you like free resources to support your coaching journey? Whether you're considering becoming a coach or you want advanced coach skills training, access our coaching resource library at teamclcc.com. Again, that's teamclcc.com. Can't wait to connect with you. And again, thanks for listening.